Work continues on the 75 Chevy Nova. Got a couple things I wanted to get done in this video. I want to address the cooling system. Needed a fan shroud in this vehicle, and has a different radiator in here, aluminum radiator from the previous owner, so finding a stock shroud is not going to fit the bill. So I went to the junkyard, and as you'll see, I found something out of a different car that a little bit of modification worked perfect. Also, replacing the gas tank in the car, the original, if you've seen in a previous episode, wound up springing a leak. Fixed it with some JB weld, which was fine to get by, but not what I wanted long term. So I managed to find one on Marketplace just about 2 hours away for $60. It was only a couple years old, so you'll get to see that installed then as well. So stick around and see the progress on the Nova. Found an 80s Cadillac here in the junkyard, and after taking a few measurements, felt confident that I could make this fan shroud fit the Nova. If you look behind the wagon, you can see the two loose wheels I had to use so that I could get up onto the hood of that Cadillac. While the belts were in place, it was a good time to break all the nuts free from this fan. With that done, then I was able to simply just cut the belts away. Normally I try not to destroy any parts when I'm in the junkyard, but let's face it, who's coming to the junkyard to buy some dried up old belts? I wanted to reuse this mount for holding the upper radiator hose, but as you can see here, I kind of struggled to try and get that to come apart without breaking anything. In the end, it was just easier to remove the clamp and slide the hose out. When I came to the junkyard, I had two different options I was looking at. One was trying to find a shroud that would fit in the dimensions that I had taken from the Nova. And the other one was to look potentially at electric fans. But in the end, since I did find the shroud that I knew was going to fit, it was really the better way of going, because that's just a budget build. And let's face it, you do electric fan, then you got to add relays, wiring, temperature sensors. So there's far more to do, more expense in it, and more things to potentially go wrong. Typical Cadillac over-engineering. With a Chevy, it would only be 2 bolts at the top and then simply slide it out of the groove on the bottom. But with Cadillac, not the case. I wound up having 2 bolts on the underside that I had to remove, and as it turns out, the shroud actually has a bottom to it that fits underneath of the radiator. So the whole assembly basically has to come apart. So I don't know, is Cadillac over-engineered or is Chevrolet under-engineered? Haven't figured that one out yet. Looks like somebody forgot to remove the fan. And of course, it was stuck on there. There was a little bit of rust underneath of that. Apparently they wouldn't let it to come free. And being so high up in the air, I didn't feel like going back down to the toolbox. It was hot. Sweat was rolling into my eyes. So I did the next best thing and used a little bit of that cadillac over engineering and made myself my own little prying tool. Just came back from the junkyard and picked up a couple items, about $30 right here. Got a shroud off of a Cadillac, as well as the fan with the clutch. This is the vacuum line I need for the Nova for the transmission. This I found in part of a Jeep, so it's a Stewart & Warner. Whenever I see a Stewart & Warner gauge, I usually grab it. So unfortunately, the water temp gauge that was in it was someone had broke the sensor off the back of it, so it was no good. Well, I was planning on getting a new set of tires for the Nova, but trying to keep this thing in a budget and working on a number of projects at the same time is keeping me from spending too much money. So what I decided I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pull the wheels and tires off of the 55 and put them on the Nova. And I actually have another set of old stock rims with white walls that I'm going to put on the 55s. And like magic, there it is. Before installing the radiator shroud, I thought I'd go ahead and start working on cleaning up the gas tank that I found on Marketplace. Before removing the sending unit, thought it might be best if I kind of scrub that area a little bit and got all the loose debris that might be there and get it cleared out before it would end up inside the tank. When removing the sending unit, it's always a little interesting when you're trying to finagle it out of the hole like that with the float and the pickup. And in this case with the Nova, as you'll end up seeing, it seems that you have to kind of compress the screen in order to get it to come out of the tank. Now the seller of the tank told me that it was a good sending unit, that the gas gauge worked. And so after pulling it out, I thought I'd go ahead and do a resistance test on it. And it's a little hard to see, but it was very inconsistent. In fact, at times I could have it sitting at one spot and the readings were just fluctuating all over. So as it turns out, that sending unit was really no good. The seller had said that the tank was about 8 years old, and other than a little bit of dirt and some rust around the neck, it seemed like it was a pretty good tank. But as you can see, the vent line apparently had been spliced together, and the hose was not in very good shape. Turning it upside down, I blocked the vent hole so no dirt would end up in it, and cleaned the underside of the tank. Hey, watch that hose. The only area that had rust was the gas neck, so after hitting it with a little rusty encapsulator, I also then shot it with some primer. The paint I wound up using was Rust-Oleum stainless steel. I think it kind of gave it a natural steel look that would have been on the tank from factory. Going to let this paint dry, so I'm going to go ahead and start working on the shroud. Taking a look here, going to have to start with probably removing that bottom. I don't think we're going to need that piece, so we'll do it like Chevrolet did it. We'll tuck it into the bottom. So with that removed, kind of eyeballed a little bit. Going to have to probably do some relief on the right-hand side to clear the transmission lines in that lower hose. But before I do that, I'm going to have to get this fan out of the way. Time for another test fit. Still a little tight, after all. It did come from a Cadillac, but definitely going to need to be modified. I think first off, we're going to have to make a relief cut to get it past the water pump. So here you can see, made that relief cut to pass the water pump, and going for another test fit. Also, I had to cut part of the right side off, about 2 inches worth, to clear the trans lines. One of the things I wanted to do was test fit this fan to ensure that it was going to be centered in that hole. Trying to figure out why it doesn't want to go down on this side, and in the end it looks like I'm going to probably have to make a small relief cut. And here you can see that small relief cut that I wound up making. And on the opposite side, I made a panel to fill in that small space, and it's at a slight angle so that way it'll still clear those trans lines. Planning where I need to put the hole to mount this new shroud. It's a little offset from where the other location was. For those that are concerned, I'm going to put a hole in my radiator. The upper support was sitting about a ½ an inch above the radiator, so there was no threat of going through that. Going to remove the clip from the Chevrolet location and swap it over to the new Cadillac location. Installing the shroud for the last time, and after all those relief cuts, it's going in a lot easier. And now we have that mount on the left side, should be able to get it bolted in, and then we'll just have to make a modified bracket for the right side. Here's a little better shot of that right-hand side. The L bracket is actually just some more scrap from what I had cut off of the shroud. And you can see there near the radiator cap how I cut that angle and put that piece in to help close that end up, so that way it'll pull air in from front of the radiator and not along the side. Installing the last screw. A little tug. Slap it, means it's done. Well, I ended up using the Cadillac fan, but I couldn't use the clutch from the Cadillac fan as that didn't fit. So I kind of swapped between the two. But the blade from the Cadillac, believe it or not, was about an inch overall shorter. So I felt a little bit more confident having it in there. Just grab paper and check the draw. I call that good. So back to the gas tank. Need to siphon out the gas that's in the tank. It's about 2 gallons worth in there. Uh, this is about the only thing I had laying around, an old kerosene pump and some extra hose, and got the job done. Started by removing the hose on the vent line. Used a hose clamp tool for closing off the fuel line to remove that. I'm not sure about you, but if I'm going to be down below that, I'd rather not have any gas pouring out into my face. Next are the gas tank straps, and really you just need to undo the nuts on the backside of the tank here. What I didn't show any video of was the line. You can see the yellow line hanging down about the gas neck. That is the power line for the fuel sending unit. So I wound up just cutting that wire and the ground wire. Having a lift with the scissors jack sure does make this job a lot easier. You don't have to have it that way. When I had to repair it with JB Weld, I actually did it on a concrete floor using a floor jack and was able to work it out of there. When removing the gas tank, don't hit your head on the bumper. With the old tank out and that sending unit, I decided to go ahead and run a test on that. But unfortunately, the way I held the multimeter, you couldn't see the readout. But this one worked very well. It was very stable numbers. If I'd stop, the numbers would hold. So in the end, I decided, well, I'm going to use the one that just came out of the car and put that into the new tank. Since the tank was clean and dry, I felt safe using a metal punch to put the lock ring back on. This little bit of rubber is going to help to protect this against those metal straps rubbing through. And time to reinstall the tank in reverse order the way we took it out. I made sure to use some thread NECs on these bolts. That way, if I ever have to pull these out, or the next owner may have to pull these out, they won't have to fight with them. Reconnecting the fuel line. And I didn't bother to show you doing the vent line or reconnecting the wires. With that done, gas back into the tank. I started to think that, maybe this car needs to be washed off. I haven't washed it since I bought it. In fact, I don't think it's been washed since it came back from West Virginia. And after all the work it's been going on in the shop, maybe it's about time to see if it'll perk it up a little bit.